Hey, everybody. I hope you're awake and recovered from parties and things like that. But I've been at CNET for a long time, and I've looked at XR and Immersive, and I'm really excited to actually meet for the first time and talk to Jesse Schell, head of Schell Games, and Tommy Palm, head of Resolution Games, who've been pushing at the boundaries of this continually for quite some time. And this is about the state of XR gaming and now, but also the future. But before that, let's go to the past. I want to just have you each talk a little bit about how you came into to this point, working in VR and XR. Jesse, we could start with you.
Yeah, so I got started pretty early, considering. I started in VR in about '92 when it was sort of first coming into consumer space at all. And so I started in graduate school, went from there to Disney, where I joined the VR studio and created a number of VR experiences for Disney Quest. Then I went from there to Carnegie Mellon in the early 2000s and started teaching classes in VR at Carnegie Mellon. And then when Oculus appeared in 2015, my game studio, Schell Games, we started making various games for that. And I think our studio's probably made about 20-something VR and AR games.
And Tommy, your path is very different. So tell us about how you got aboard.
Yeah, so I'm from Sweden. I've been really interested in computers since I saw them the first time. I started working with mobile games for quite some time, and then in 2014 I decided to take this step over and then work with virtual reality after trying the DK to feeling that it's just software remaining in order for this to be really big. I tried virtual reality back in '92 as well, and I was thinking this is definitely the future for games. You can be immersed in this whole thing. It's taken a long time.
Yeah. So getting into it right now, it's interesting. The present is stranger than I thought it would be, in a lot of ways. But that's an understatement. But in XR, we're at a point where a lot of stuff that had been there with VR is now being opened up to mixed reality on existing headsets. It's been like that now for Quest. It's Vision Pro. We're having a lot of stuff pop in with AI on all fronts, and it's pressuring in, and then also a lot of form shifts. So I guess at the moment, how are you seeing game development for yourselves in let's start with mixed reality. What have you been observing? We can start with you, Jesse.
Oh, yeah, so mixed reality, it's so interesting because mixed reality, I think, is something that the general public hasn't really seen coming. The number of people who are shocked when they put on a headset and like, oh, I can see outside the headset. Whoa! Like they have no idea that this medium is even part of it, and the capabilities of the current headsets that way are so strong and getting stronger. So for the game space, I find it very exciting because there's so much unexplored territory in mixed reality. We've been exploring VR for a long time, and even in the marketplace, we've now had 10 solid years of exploring it in the marketplace. Mixed reality is new and different, and even though, some of the interfaces have similarities, the nature of the interactions, the nature of the psychology of being in the space is very different. And so it's exciting because there's just so much room for exploration right now.
And Tommy, how about you?
I think that when it comes to virtual reality, not everybody is interested in that. I think a lot of us gamers feel virtual reality is great. We can tell a much more immersive story and all of this. But augmented reality is something that I think concerns everybody. It's much easier. It solves the problem of cyber sickness to a large extent. And it's, especially when the form factor is coming down, it's much easier to just pop on some glasses and see something really amazing. So hopefully this is a moment that's actually going to open up for much more people. And I agree with Jesse. It's fascinating from a computer science point of view to be exploring the frontier and see what you can do with this stuff. So much new, really, really interesting things, not only in games, But game has always been fascinating for like exploring new technology and kind of solving early user design interaction.
And right now, your games have been exactly been exploring boundaries and social and limits in a lot of different ways. Spatial Ops can be anywhere, and I have not even played around with it outside. But we're talking about that. That's a fascinating way to do it. Party versus blending people socially and their rooms, home sports blending into rooms. But you know what? A lot of people now in XR, I'm seeing a lot of mixed reality that's kind of just adding a mixed reality layer or just kind of turning on a little bit. But you seem like you're designing a lot more stuff for that form. And tell me a little bit about, you talk about how you're approaching that right now.
Well, some of the games that we do can coexist really well in both virtual reality and augmented reality. And Deio is a great example of that. When we started designing Deio, we felt this could be really exciting. We could work on your table and be this magical board game, and it could be really immersive in virtual reality. You feel like you're playing Dungeons and Dragons of sorts. But in this mixed reality, there's just so many new, really exciting things. One of the things that I'm, as a designer, really interested in is when you're moving around and really kind of exploring the space and using your body and using the body as a controller for many things. And you get all these hormones that we have in our bodies that kicks in and helps creating something very exciting. And you mentioned Spatial Ops, which it's a little bit of an odd case because you preferably need more headsets in one location. So it's a co-located experience. But if you take the time to do it, it is really, really fun. And I think it shows that there is going to be a really large genre here with a lot of experience at work like that. And it's going to be very fun to do with friends and family or colleagues at work.
Yeah, one thing we always say is XR is always about the body. That's the difference between flat and XR is if you're making something for XR and it's not about the body, what are you doing? You know, you probably should be doing that in a flat medium. And so that's what VR and AR have in common. They both are about your body fundamentally. The difference between VR and AR is VR is always about going to someplace else. AR is always about being here, right? So we talked about being the difference between here and there. And there are a lot of people, VR is just overwhelming for them. The notion of I'm going to be in a place, I'm going to like lose touch with the space around me so I could be in this other place is overwhelming and for some people scary because they become scared about, well, wait, if I don't know what's going on in my actual space, am I in danger? And so they have a lot of fear with that. Some people, they love the immersion of going to this like other place and I'm in a totally other world. And some people don't like that. But AR, yeah, it's here. It's right here. And so but it still needs to be about your body. So definitely a lot of the explorations we've done in the AR space, in the mixed reality space, are about, okay, well, what does that mean? And you mentioned Party Versus. Party Versus was based on a philosophy we've had that AR fundamentally is about people and furniture is the thing that we always say. Because we care about interacting with other people, and furniture is, like everyone acts like furniture isn't important. Furniture is the intersection between your body and the space that you're in, right? We don't intersect with this room in general, we intersect with the chair, right? If I want to have a drink, I need this table, right? And so furniture ends up being a really important part of AR because if I'm going to interact with a space, I'm doing it via the furniture. And one of the great breakthroughs recently is now that the Meta Quest has good understanding of the furniture in your space, and it allows for things to be possible that weren't possible before. And I think the advances that we see in terms of continued room parsing, room awareness, are going to like really grow AR as a medium.
And speaking of bodies, this is a really interesting part for me because I find as I use a lot of this stuff, I'll have areas that are inside my comfort zone, outside my comfort zone, physically. That increases in some way, in a lot of ways, when you get into the overlay into a real space. Two of my favorite games that you both do, Deio and the Expect You to Die series, they kind of meet you where you're sitting, so they kind of start like building out from that. And I'm curious where you find you meet people where they are versus expecting them or hoping that they'll extend out a bit, how that works, and also for the ability for that people might have in terms of how they can move or how they can, how physically able they are to do some of those things.
Yeah, I mean, you guys must have to think about that a lot. I mean, with the variety of games you've done there.
Yeah, I think they are different user groups typically. Like, not everybody wants to get out of their chair to play a game. That's very, like, I think one of the popularities to Deio is that it's something that you can do from your most comfortable gaming chair. Whereas other, like Racket Club or Home Sports that you mentioned earlier, it's fun because it's really showing what you can do with these new controllers that, it's basically an extension of your hands. And I think it's more unique in a way. Like, Deio can be played on a regular PC as well, and it's almost the same experience as it is with a headset. But when you're really utilizing your body and your hands, it's a very, very interesting space.
Yeah, I mean, I think the choices we make game to game, right? There's times you say, you know what, this is going to be, like the I Expect You to Die games were 100% designed to be seated experiences, because at the time, we initially believed most people were going to play VR seated. When the Oculus first came out, the instructions insisted that you play seated. They demanded it. And again, being seated, one of the nice things is that was a game we didn't want you to move around. Because you had telekinesis, we wanted you to stay still. When you're seated, your expectation is, why would I move around? I'm seated, right? And so we had a game constraint. We had to make every level make sense that you were sitting down. But different people want different things. Some people love the super active games. Some people want games that are much more sedate. So there's definitely an inclusion aspect to this. Whenever possible, like even we did Until You Fall, which was a sword fighting game, which largely it plays really well standing up. But some people, we made sure to put in a seated mode for it because you could. Party Versus, that wasn't really possible. It's a game about literally moving around your space. There was no other way to do it. And I do think that's part of the magic of AR, VR, and MR in general is the variety of experiences. Like the number of different ways you can interact is part of what's exciting.
It's interesting too, because I think there's something about being pushed outside your comfort zone that's a really interesting opportunity. It kind of makes me think, I mean, this is something I think about a lot, and Jesse, you've worked in a lot of theme park design work, but I think about theme parks where you're encouraged to take a leap and go on something you might be a little scared to do, and then once you do it, you say, wow, I did that, and I can do that. And I've found that in mixed reality and in VR quite a bit. I know, Tommy, you're working in some of the sports things like pickleball and stuff where you might say, wow, I've never played this before, but now I could get into it. Supernatural is one of my most used things on Quest now. I was intimidated by it, but it's kind of teaching me. So where do you see some of those opportunities and some of the challenges there? Like pushing people to do new things.
I mean, I think part of it is messaging. Like, this isn't a thing the video game industry is used to, having to talk about how physical or not physical a game is going to be. So part of it is figuring out how to even talk about it, and then part of it is looking at sort of audience segmentation. The fitness market in XR is becoming a real thing, that's a real important segment. And at the same time, one of the biggest growth areas we see in VR is 7 to 12-year-old boys generally playing games like Gorilla Tag in these, and what they like about it is the physicality. The physicality isn't a drawback, it's the appeal. It's a big part of the immersion of the game. So I think it has a lot to do with, okay, what are different audiences looking for? What experiences can be physical, want to be physical? What experiences can be both? It requires a lot of thinking, and you have to experiment. If you don't spend time working with actual players, you're not going to learn. You're not going to learn what works and what doesn't work. One of the things I think no one's fully grappled with is people's tolerance for motion sickness is changing. And this isn't super well understood, but definitely we see that fewer people get motion sick in VR now than used to.
Interesting.
And again, it's another thing with the young kids. Young kids in general don't get motion sick. And so we were seeing them gravitate in. And one of the things we're all waiting to see is we've got all these 10 to 12-year-olds playing these games. When they become 16, 17, 18, 25, do they start to become motion sick and then they change their play habits, or because they've grown up in it, they get their sea legs and they don't? And we're all waiting to see. So it's like it always happens. The technologies are changing, but humans are changing too.
Do you find that I want to talk about Vision Pro and Vision, because you both have worked on Vision OS games. Tommy, you've had a number of games on Vision already. Game Room was a launch. Recently, you just announced Pickle Pro at WWDC. Puzzle Sculpt is one that Schell did. Where do you see differences there? Or, because that's kind of is that a representation of what's coming? Or what other challenges do you see emerging?
Oh yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, my Apple Vision Pro is the headset that I use the most, and I find it very useful for productivity aspects, and it helps me having it updated and having it charged, and it's comfortable to wear it for a long time. So it's definitely kind of a seeing into the future a little bit. Like when you get that super high resolution and really great lenses, it becomes easier to use the headset for a really long time. At the same time, I mean, with the Quest 3, I played Deio for hours on end without thinking about that I have the headset on. So it depends a little bit on what you're doing as well. But definitely really like that Apple has come to the table of XR. They bring a lot of mature tools and really efficient chipsets that makes this really an exciting part of the market.
I would say initially the biggest difference between the platforms was the AVP not having controllers and having to do everything with open hands. That's obviously a big change in terms of what you're able to do. Of course, that's, some of the recent announcements, it's clear that, okay, that's it's going to be a choice going forward. Like Meta is having also more support for open hands, and it's one of the unresolved questions of what are going to be the places where a game controller is the right choice? What are the places when open hand is going to be the right choice? I often talk to people who say, oh, these controllers are temporary, they'll be gone, everything will be open hand. Right. And I can't agree with that at all, because of the importance of tactile feedback. Tactile feedback is just, it is one of the very primal things about human beings, is the importance of tactility. And when you have a controller and you get that immediate tactile feedback, with the open hand you get very little. You might get finger-to-finger touch. Everything else is zero tactile, and we value tactile so much. So it seems clear that open hand and controllers are both part of the future. Exactly how it's all going to be segmented, what are the games where you can do either way, what are the games that can only be one way, is a bit of an open question that everybody's exploring. There's some belief, I think, that for AR, open hand, since AR addresses a more casual audience, arguably, open hand may be better suited in that space, and VR having a controller is probably going to be more the norm. But we don't know. Everybody's still experimenting.
I really think that this is one of the the big challenges with this new technology. And if you look at how long time it took for mouse and keyboard to become the default and for people to learn how to close windows and do all of these actions, in this 3D environment, the problem space is so much bigger. And it's really an enormous challenge as you approach it. Like, you design a game, how does it work with controllers, how does it work without controllers? And every time I stand on a show floor demoing the stuff we do, I get reminded about how, as soon as you have controllers, it becomes very unintuitive. I'm like, oh, you need to use this button to do this. And
right, and the particularly weird case of, I'm trying to give you a tutorial for a controller that you're holding, but you can't actually see it, right? Like, there's the challenges of it are serious. Yeah.
Well, it's a good, let's get into the future, because at this point, this feels like we're heading there, and we are all heading there all the time. But what I'm getting here and what I'm feeling increasingly is, this shift in form. So it's like, there's developing for consoles, and then this is like the console, the hardware, where is it going to be? We've had VR, people working in VR, there's a move to glasses. AI is pressing in everywhere. As I was saying, there's eye tracking, there's hand tracking, there are rings, there are bands, there might be spatial controllers or not. How do you navigate that now? And what I'm worried too about what survives. How games will be adapted in the existing VR landscape, or we've already faced that with Vision about how you begin to explore, and it seems the forms are changing even more.
Mm-hmm. I think this is a really interesting question. I think actually VR might have a couple of really tough years ahead of it, because for a while now, that has been the form factor that has been kind of leading the charge. And now we're seeing that the glasses form factor is starting to become feasible, and there will be a lot of focus on that. And yes, the visionaries are saying it's going to be the same device that will be able to do both VR and XR, but I don't think the short term we're going to see much simpler games, for instance, right? The games where it's more like the games were on your mobile phone in the beginning, where they're much more battery efficient and not these full 3D worlds that we've been doing on VR. So from our part as studio, we are doing more and more regular AR games that won't have a VR match right now.
Yeah, a lot of this has to do with who is making the headsets and why are they making them, right? Right now, we're seeing Meta and Apple are very much dominating the headset space. When you look at the interests of these companies, games aren't really a top priority for them. They're both supporting games, but games are not a major part of their revenue as companies. It's not necessarily a primary interest for them. So it feels like they have their eyes on a much more mass market vision where games are part of it, but games aren't the primary utility. And eventually, someone's going to come into the market who is all about, we're going to make the best gaming VR headset ever. We've seen Sony experiment in this space, but technology always diverges over time so that the technologies meet what people need, right? You'd think it would converge, but it doesn't. Like, VCRs could have recorded radio, but that's nope, we have a radio, we have a TV. Technologies tend to separate, and I think we're going to see more separation over time of VR versus mixed reality as the use cases become more apparent. When the use cases become clear, we'll see more specialization and more separation. One of the trends, we were talking earlier about tech companies in general tend to ignore children. Game companies can never ignore children. Play is children's job. And so we're going to see the play part of it is probably going to start to get more child focused, over time. And I think that's really what's going to start to drive the separation. The existence of the 3S headset being under $300 really opened the door for the kids, and the kids are like really dominating the revenues on the Quest headset right now. And so I think that's how we're going to see productivity focus, which is probably going to be very lightweight glasses at probably a higher price point. Whereas for the play market, people are going to care less about that lightweight form factor, and they're going to care more about, well, how immersive is it and how affordable is it.
So getting to AI, which is everywhere at this point, and can both offer promises and threats.
Yeah.
What do you see? And you've both talked about this in the past, and have been thinking about it. Where do you see that factoring into XR in that future for gaming? And also, what are the things that freak you out about it, or feel threatening?
Well, there's two different things I want to say about that. So one of the things is, I personally think that the killer app for the glass is going to be the AI assistant. Like, I use AI very much in my day-to-day, whatever I do, both home and at work. And I would love to kind of have it hands-free, knowing what the context that I'm in all the time, so I don't have to type that in when I'm communicating with the LLMs. So I think that's not only something for me, that's going to be for a lot of people, which is great, because we've always we needed this kind of killer app to start expanding market much more aggressively. The second thing I want to say about AI and games is that it's starting to really changing the landscape of how we're making games. And it's creating a lot of uncertainty. Do you want to start a 6-year project, creating the next big open game world right now, or should you wait because there is a technology that's going to make it even faster?
Yeah.
So this is the classic problem of sending satellites out in space, or if you want to go far, next year you have the technology to go faster, so you would always.
Yeah. I agree with you about the AI glasses. The ability for the glasses to have cameras to understand the context of what you're doing, to have microphones to understand the context of what you're talking about, and then to be able to communicate with you privately with audio opens up so many doors of interaction that make people more comfortable in terms of how to use these things, how to make them useful. That's feeling like it will be a primary use case. The interesting question is, how much do visuals matter? Like, we're watching the Meta Ray-Ban glasses be surprisingly successful. Basically a headset with no visuals, because it's making use of the private audio and the AI. So that's an interesting space, and where visuals fit into that is going to be a question, and we'll find out. But one of the biggest places I see when we talk about what's your peanut butter and chocolate coming together moment is AI and AR really want to be together. Because the problem you have as a game designers are used to having total control over the game environment. That's what a level designer does. They design levels and spaces, and they have total control over what the player is going to do. If I'm making an AR game, which is about your space and your walls and your furniture, and you're going to play it in your house where you are, I have no idea how your house is set up.
Yeah.
Right? If I want to tell you a story in your house, I have to make a very adaptable situation. And one of the strongest powers of AR, it's fine to interact with virtual objects. When there's virtual people in the room with you, it feels so real, particularly when they know where the furniture is and they sit on the furniture and they can move about your house in space, and you can make eye contact with them and have a vocal conversation with them. It's incredibly powerful. So one of my big beliefs about a very important genre that's going to be showing up in I think of it in the early 2030s, is my clunky name for it is adaptive in-home storytelling. right? So you put on your headset, and then you hear, knock at the door of your actual house, and you go and open the actual door. Oh, virtual character standing outside. They've got a bunch of groceries. They're like, hey, I got a problem to solve. Follow me, let's go to the kitchen. Oh, it knows where the kitchen is. It goes to your kitchen, it knows where it is. You close the door, you follow it into the kitchen. It's unpacking groceries, putting them on the counter. It's starting to kind of prepare some food. Look, we gotta help me cook this. We need to cook this in your oven. It knows where your oven is. We're gonna cook this virtual food. We're gonna do this because, buddy, up in your guest room, there's a problem. And we need to make these baits because these things are coming and they're going to come in through the ceiling. We got to get ready. So we're going to go up there and do this. In order for something like this to be possible, the characters need to improvise because all the spaces are going to be different. They'll know the stories they want to tell, but they have to adapt them because your home is going to become the stage and the setting, and they're going to have to figure out, how am I going to tell the story I want to tell given what I know about your house and your home? And so I think that's going to become the thing that's very powerful, but it requires AI. It's a medium that won't work with just AR. It requires be able to move around, sense the furniture, understand the whole home, but also requires adaptive AI characters.
So here's like a challenge question that comes to mind. I keep thinking about this. As we get more adaptive with our games and with our experiences, how does that interface with other people that we're playing with? We're kind of already facing that in AR where, is it in your home? Is it in their home? Your games also explore opening a window and bridging the world. But how do you see that being negotiated as common terms in those types of games? Like,
I don't quite know what you mean.
I guess in terms of if you start having an adaptive reality that seems a way to you, and someone else is getting an adaptive reality that's being mapped to them, it's that question of, do we improv? Do we have a common
people
agreement?
Sharing a home? You mean
sharing their home, knowing, or do we say our characters are the same, or the set's different for us? Where are we really, and how does that manifest the more adaptive worlds and multiplayer you have?
Yeah, there's actually a novel about this called Meta Place where they paint a pretty good picture of how some of this could work. They talk about rules such as it's very aware of other people in the world, so it sends you on quests. In the story, it's an amazing story because the premise is sedentary video games became illegal as a health risk, but physical movement games totally legal, and so everyone starts playing those, and so these very geolocated games become normal in their universe. And so in their story, they send you on quests, and the game is aware of the individuals in the world who are also in the game, so you can see them when you're out in the world, who's in the game and who's not. And the people who aren't in the game, they appear as scary ghost monsters, and if you touch them, you will die in the game. And so, I think people are going to start, everyone's going to have to start thinking about this, and particularly when we're talking about multiple people in the home and how does it all interact and intersect. There's so much to explore. It's just that's what's exciting, is it's all unexplored new territory.
To get into that geolocated, looking at what Niantic Spatial is doing, and Peridot here, the demo following you around, and where spectacles are moving, where partnerships are emerging with some, again, with Niantic Spatial and Meow Wolf, but also with other areas. I mean, Universal is talking about this a little bit for marketing, but also potentially for parks. And there's a lot of talk about activations with these, where you might use them. That physical world, how do you see that building out? Going to theme parks, how much overlap is there with that? That might be that you might start building physical places to play these games, or how do you navigate that outside your home?
I'm a big believer in we're going to see physical spaces designed for AR because it's powerful. That's not the primary use case right now. It's not the use case the headset designers are assuming you're going to use this in your home, in your office, typically in one room. They typically don't expect you to move from room to room with it, but the power is incredible. Like the first time this really clicked for me, I was at my desk in my office working on, experimenting with a puzzle sculpt prototype, And I looked at my watch through the headset and realized, oh, there's a meeting I need to be at. And okay, and I went to take off the headset, and I'm like, oh, this is kind of too bad because I wanted to talk to somebody about this. And then I'm like, wait a minute. And then I realized I could pick up the puzzle and walk down the hallway carrying the virtual object, and then got into the meeting, and I came in and put it down on the table. It was the first time I'd carried a virtual object from room to room and treated it like a real object. And I said, look, there's this problem here. You put on the headset. You see, and that power is there's really something to it. And so in the themed space, when you have total control over the physical environment, and now I can blend that with the virtual, there's power there. It's a new kind of experience, I think. I think it's going to be more like, it's going to be more like in the Meow Wolf space is sort of what I think of, because Meow Wolf's interesting because it's kind of like a museum. It's kind of like a fun house, right? It's sort of got both. And I think AR experiences that are in controlled environments are going to work well, and partly they have very good throughput. Right? You look at one of the challenges in kind of VR things is you can only have so many people because for various reasons. Here, because it's AR, I can see the real people. It's okay that there's like lots of people in the space and that they're all interacting with virtual things together. The hardware is not really set up for this use case yet, but it will become possible. So I do think that themed museum-like experiences are probably going to be some very interesting, just innovations, pioneering experiences.
Yeah, I personally really look forward to when we get headsets and glasses that is designed for being outside, that has the visual component as well. The Quest 3 works great to be outside, unless it starts raining. I guess you're in problem. But there is definitely like magic to play outside and use your body even as an adult. And I think I haven't worked with theme parks. Sounds amazing, but the location-based arcades is another place where these type of technologies really well fitted for. Like there's somebody there who has taken care of the headset, made sure that it's updated and all of these things, so you can have an experience that is ready for you as you arrive. And that's been one of the things that worked quite well in this space, except for COVID, because then it really doesn't work.
Yeah, because one of the powers, I think, of when you can control the space, talking about tactility, if I can control the space, I can potentially have virtual things that are touchable with my hand.
Right.
Right? Because I'm taking a physical object and I'm covering it with a virtual object. And so you can imagine, oh wow, here's a virtual dragon, but it's in a place where there's actually like a physical dragon model, so that you can reach out and pet it, and like that's one of the things we always say, location-based entertainment, the golden rule is you've got to give them something they can't get at home. And touchable virtual experiences is absolutely in that space.
I got a demo out here from somebody who brought a mini golf or a putter and a golf ball, and had a virtual environment and overlaid the golf ball with a bomb. And I instantly forgot there was a physical ball, and I shot it quite hard out in there. It's funny to see how.
I will say some advice I give to anyone who wants to think about this. We were talking about the show Deio Coil. You can find it on Netflix. It's an anime series about augmented reality, and it's set in this fictional world where children are super into augmented reality, and it's very thoughtful that way. And so you can look for Deio Coil on Netflix. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, it reminds me of it makes me wonder where you have like skate parks and basketball courts, basically like spaces that'll be set up for that you don't even have to pay admission, that you say, you start having those safe spaces that don't overlap, that don't impede with somebody else, but you know that they're a spot. I also, I mean, there are so many creators here, people that are working on games, people who are navigating this space. And Jesse, you've done so much work in teaching about game design and lenses. What advice would you give right now for, like, just thoughts about how you'd approach such an uncertain space, thinking about making games right now?
Okay, and I assume you're not talking about making games for fun. I think you're talking about making games for money.
I don't know, we're both. I mean, is there something, I find this where I'm trying to get back in my own creativity, where I go, there's a part where I go, I don't want to lose that creative spark, but that you want to noodle around, but you also want to think about business. I don't know how you navigate that. Or
Well,
what
I
you
mean,
do.
I'd certainly say if you're making games for fun, this is such a good time to be trying crazy stuff, because you can try some crazy stuff. Did you ever want to make a game where, like, you can like eat virtual items? You can, there are these things you can do now that we've never done before. So there's room for all this experimentation, which is fantastic. In terms of, okay, I'm actually trying to make money in this space, then you have to look very closely at the audience trends, what people are buying. The simple fact of, like, the meta store right now, one of the things we know about online game stores is, for whatever reason, they always tip one way or the other. They always tip toward premium, like Steam.
Right.
There's free to play on Steam, but, like, nobody, right? Or mobile, free to play, almost no premium. Premium is chased out of there. It doesn't really exist. Meta's store had been premium, premium, premium. They opened the door to free to play, didn't really go great, go great, go great. Then the kids came in, and suddenly free to play is here. And so now it's in this weird place in the middle, and it's hard to believe it's going to stay there. It feels like it's going to tip one way or the other, or it's going to split in half or something, and we don't know. So it's very important to look at the strategies that were working for making premium games even just 3 years ago aren't working the same way now. And so if you're going to try and make games as a sustainable business, you have to look closely at, like, okay, wait a minute, who's going to buy it? How are they going to buy it? Why are they going to buy it? How many people are actually on this platform? You have to take all of those things very, very seriously.
But on the hobby level, making games for fun, now AI is kind of at a perfect spot, I think, right now.
You're not kidding.
Stop developing it, right? It's
Yeah.
good where it is, because right now it's super fun to do things and do this vibe coding and throw simple games together in very, very little time.
Yeah, vibe coding can be a challenge for making anything finished and solid and perfect, but for, like, making quick prototypes to prove out this concept, that concept, like, it accelerates things meaningfully, and it's a wonderful time to start experimenting with that. Yeah.
I'm hoping there's some chance for like hedging the bet safely with, like, the promise of Android XR, or the point where I guess Revision's looking to sharing apps, like, that people could be making games that don't have to choose quite as much, or how you could deal with that, where you could have something that lives in the mobile store that can also live in AR, versus saying, I'm going to absolutely commit, but I don't know if that's a realistic, like,
Well, having
bridge.
games that crossover games, I think, are important. We just did this with Among Us. Like, we'd done Among Us VR for, I don't know, we've had it out for a couple of years, and we just recently did Among Us 3D, which is flat 3D version of Among Us, but it cross-plays with the VR.
Yeah.
And I really feel like the cross-play between VR and flat, when you can doesn't work for every game, but when you can make games that do that, it helps enormously, because in VR, the most successful games are multiplayer games, but multiplayer has a problem. If there's not enough people in your base, there's no one else to play with, and everything sort of crumbles. But if you can now bring in flat players, and there's 10 times as many flat players as there are VR players, suddenly you can kind of get the best of both. You always can have players in your world, and you have a VR multiplayer game. So I think that's we're working on a new game like that right now that from the get-go is flat and VR at the same time. So I feel like that's going to become a trend, because you know, if you're a VR player and you're like, I want to invite my friends, oh, but they don't all have VR headsets.
Right.
Well, now you can, because they can come in on flat, you know, and that can work great.
No, I think it definitely helps with accessibility and the social aspect of it. It's much more interesting to talk to other people about something that they can actually try out quite simply. They don't have to buy new hardware in order to test out.
You had that with Acron. There's some element of crossover with that.
Yeah. No, that was a super fun project to work with when one person is in VR and the others are on
Be nice to learn
phones.
more.
And,
Okay. Yeah. I wanted to make sure, too, that we had time for questions, which there may be a lot of people that do. We're going to open it up. And if people have any questions for Jesse or Tommy, and I assume not for me, but please go ahead. Yeah. Okay. Sure. How would you build a game for Ray-Ban metas?
yeah, it's definitely more difficult when you don't have the visual component there. But there has been some really cool things for headphones that people have done, like Zombie Run, I think is a really cool example of how to take something that you want to do if you want to go jogging and enhance it into something very exciting. So I think that there's definitely ways, but it's quite a difficult design problem where you have to do something.
I think definitely the key is working with the strengths of the medium. And it's like, what do you have with that medium? You have the ability to have a verbal conversation, like with what this thing is, and you have some ability to look at physical things. So those are kind of your ingredients. I think that's one of those cases where AI agents can make this way more interesting, because then they, again, have the ability to improvise, and you can have a natural conversation about what you're doing and what you're seeing. So it's weird. It's a weird medium, because it's like we'd created games for the Amazon Alexa. That's pure voice, but this is different because the visuals are the real world, and it can have some sense of those. So it definitely will be a different medium to create games on. Yeah.
But I definitely feel you could do really cool historic recreations of, like, where you go to a certain place and you learn stuff.
This is already happening. People are using it as a tour guide.
Yeah. And then the next generation, I'm sure, will have some sort of visual, so you can see an old photo of what this view looked like 100 years ago or so.
Is there another?
I have one right here with the microphone.
Oh yeah. All right.
With the booming voice. A quick question and then a follow-up question. The quick question for Jesse, I looked up Metaplace, the novel, and it didn't exist. So I'd love to know the name of that novel if it comes to you.
Oh, maybe I got the wrong name. I will have to. Sorry, I'll have to think about that. I'm almost sure it's called Metaplace, but maybe I have it wrong.
And then
sorry, I'll try and look it up.
Yeah, post it online if you find it.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the follow-up is, in that imagination of a world where AR is everywhere, have you started thinking about game design that takes place everywhere, not just in your home with the AR characters who would know your home, but people who actually can play with you in the world, show up on street corners, be in your life like the game all the time?
Yeah, it's a hard space because it involves such social externalities. Even if you look at the challenges that Niantic has had, I mean, obviously they've had tremendous success with Pokemon Go, and they've been so inventive and so thoughtful and so clever that many people had predicted, oh, of course, there are going to be dozens of successful games that work that way, and that's not what we've seen. There's a narrowness to the way people are willing to interact in those spaces. And it's going to be one of those things, I think, that evolves over time, because it's going to involve changes in social norms. And I guess the short version, I would say, is if you're going to do that, start with the children. Because if you tell a child, put on these glasses, you can go outside and play kickball with Pikachu, they'll do that all day. But adults will feel weird about it. We have a name for when adults go into a fantasy world outside and run around, and it's called LARPing. And we all laugh because it's not considered socially acceptable for adults to confuse the real world and the imaginary world that way, but children are totally comfortable, 100% comfortable doing that. So that's where I'll expect to see the pioneering work happening, personally.
Hi, I'm a designer that, while I don't use AI, I do
Ooh, can you bring the microphone a little closer to your mouth?
Oh, okay. I'm a designer that, while I don't use AI, I don't need it as part of my workflow. I do use AR and VR as part of the extension of my studio.
Yeah.
So other than Google Tilt Brush, which is a really popular tool that designers use to prototype things, I'm curious about what you're seeing coming up in the industry that might be next that we can enjoy to add to our physical studio and extend it digitally.
Oh, this is such a good question. It's, I mean, I can just say for us, we have not been using immersive tools for creating assets. They haven't been to the point where we can do what we want professionally with them. It's almost kind of strange that that isn't there. Do you guys have anything like that?
We've tried multiple times,
Yeah.
and like sometimes we have somebody who's very enthusiastic at trying to do it, but
Yeah.
then they still fall back. But that was one of the predictions I had. If I was on a panel 8 years ago, I would say this is one of the first fields where 3D interface really makes sense. I was wrong.
But it's not.
Partially
It's
because
not there
of
yet.
the T-Rex arm theory that you're.
Oh
you're
yeah,
talking
we were
about.
talking earlier about some of the challenges of manipulation. That everybody looks at Minority Report and like, oh, that would be great, but arms are heavy, and you get sore. So we often talk about the whole problem of how can you do everything you want with T-Rex arms, because that works with phones. We used to have touch screens on computers and everyone hated them because my arm was heavy. But once I could hold my phone here and do this with T-Rex arms, then now it's totally doable. And AR has a real interesting challenge in that the T-Rex arm space is here, so you want all of your interactions to be here if possible. But visually, what I can see is up here, unless I tip my neck, which isn't the best, especially with a headset on. And so you have this weird little space that's about 4 inches tall, where like my head can comfortably see it and my hands can comfortably manipulate it. So it's just it's a more limited design space than we'd all hope. And then the tactility, right? Even just, the artists working with a real stylus on a real surface, or even just working with a mouse, that tactility is important. We haven't yet had that fully, no one has made a tactile experience for artists that also uses things spatially in the way that they need. I'm sure it's coming, but it's I don't know, not here yet.
Hi. So
Can we do one more?
earlier there was a discussion about tactile feedback versus open, using your hands for manipulation. So what is your opinion about using tactile gloves or rings for tactile feedback?
Ooh, tactile gloves and rings.
I've tried it a few times on show floors, and it is really cool if you can feel things on your skin as the
Yeah.
spider walks over you. But it is one of these things with the accessories. It's hard to do for consumers.
Yeah.
If you have a location-based thing, I'm sure people really want to try that and use it in their apps.
So one of the things, I often get frustrated because a lot of people trying to make tactile interfaces oversimplify tactility. Tactility is so complicated. It involves so many different nerves, so many different parts of the brain. It's not just a feeling of something on your skin, it's pressure on your muscles, it's pressure in your bones, it's senses going all the way through your whole body, and it's easy to underestimate what it's like to do real tactility. I know when I look at where are the easy wins, when I have open hand, you could say zero tactility. It's not true. When I touch to touch like this, that's tactile and I can feel it. One of the problems right now that we have is we have optical sensors trying to detect when my fingers are touching, but when I'm 0.5 millimeter away, and then I go another 0.5 millimeter and I touch, For me, as a human, I can totally feel the difference between this, and it's a very important difference. Optically, the computer generally can't sense it. It has no idea. In the 90s, there was a tactile glove that was, you put on the glove and the main thing that it did is it had fingertip sensors so that it could tell which finger was touching. It is by far the best tactile interface I've used in 40 years. The ability to be able to grab things this way, and that's how it would do things modally. Like you would grow things by using your middle finger, and then you'd stretch things by using your ring finger. And you had the perfect tactility because as soon as you touched, you knew you touched, the computer you knew you touched, zero latency. This is a strong interface that hasn't been much used yet. And I think someone's going to crack the code of how are we really noting this touch. That for me, as soon as someone cracks that, I think it's going to become quite standard.